commotion with Mr. Ben. So if you're in kindergarten through 5th grade, you are welcome to head that way. I was just looking at my notes, and Michael was giving me a funny look, and I said, Michael, do you want to preach for me this morning? Michael Dolan up here, and he said, what do you mean? I said, do you want to preach? And he said, do I just read through your notes? I said, yeah, that's fine. You can just read through the notes. And he looked at him. He said, well, how much is there? You guys are going that way. Sam and Finley, Colton and Laney. You guys are sugar high or something still. You had a good Halloween. Anyways, Michael looked at my notes and he said, I don't have the patience for that. I'm thinking, well, you're right. I probably don't either, but we're going to do this together. All right, today we're starting a new series based on the book of Daniel. Daniel is a book of the Bible in the Old Testament, kind of 2/3 of the way back or so. And we actually went through the book of Daniel with Legacy probably a year ago, if I'm guessing right. I don't know for sure. But anyways, it's a super cool book. If you're not familiar with it, I would encourage you for the next several weeks, through the month of November at least, to be reading through it on your own, because I'm not going to be able to hit every verse, every detail of everything, but it would be a lot more beneficial for you to read it on your own. It's easy read. It's not long. It's 12 chapters, and there's a lot of great things in it. And so we're going to look at several different stories where Daniel took a stand for God, and not only are we going to learn about the life of Daniel, we're going to talk about how we ourselves as Christ followers need to take a stand, and we need to stand in a lot of different ways. And so each week we're going to look at different stories about how Daniel and his friends stood, and today we're going to be talking about how to stand out. And I know I've mentioned this several times in the last couple of weeks, how we should look different, right? As followers of Christ, we should look different than the rest of the world. We should be doing different things. I'm not saying physically look different, although maybe we do, but by the things that we're doing, the things we do should be different. And so we're going to talk about how to stand out in the right ways, at the right time, and for the right reasons, right? Because lots of times we don't always know what those things are. And so when we do this, when we stand out in the right ways, at the right time, and for the right reasons, it can literally change the direction of our lives, right? And if you do the opposite, if you compromise on the wrong things at the wrong time, in the wrong way, it can change the direction of your life, right? And a lot of us have been in those positions. We've compromised the decisions we've made, and so we've made wrong decisions, and it's often results in sin and negative things that are not glorifying to God. And so over the next few weeks, we're going to talk about this and talk about taking a stand for the things that matter the most. So today we're going to be in Daniel chapter 1. If you have your Bibles, that's great. You can open it because I'll be kind of jumping around. But if you don't, it'll be on the screen, of course. But again, I would encourage you to read through this on your own during the week. And I want to give you a quick backstory of Daniel, what's going on. During this time, King Nebuchadnezzar was a king, and he was an evil king. He destroyed Jerusalem, okay? He destroyed everything in Jerusalem, but not only did he just burn the whole city, he made a point to destroy the temple, okay, the church at the time. And so he destroyed the temple, but not only did he destroy the temple, he went back after he burned everything, destroyed everything, and he looked for religious symbols, anything that symbolized Yahweh, right? The one true God, the God we worship and serve today. Anything that resembled him, any symbols of anything, he went ahead and destroyed them even further, even more so. And so it's like, on top of all of that, why are you going crazy and destroying the symbols? But not only did he do those things, he wanted to destroy the future of Jerusalem and the future of people following Yahweh, and he wanted people to follow pagan gods. And so the way that he destroyed their future, he told his leaders, the chief of courts and everything else, to go into Jerusalem, and whoever's there, find the best of the best. And we're going to talk about this in a minute with these verses, but he said, find the best of the best and bring them back here, because now they're going to be our leaders in the future. I'm going to train them to live like we live, to believe like we believe, and to do what we do, and I'm going to train them to be the best of the best. And so we're going to look at this in verses 3-5. I kind of summarized it, but we'll go through it together. It says, then the king ordered Ashpenaz, which if your name's Ashpenaz, I'm sorry, that's terrible. Hopefully they just called him Ash for short, because that's horrible. But chief of his court officials, to bring into the king's service some of the Israelites from the royal family and the nobility, young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. And so he wanted the best of the best, like us, right? Like you and me here, the best of the best. He would have picked us. I'm joking. You can smile. Loretta's the only one that listens and gets my jokes, and I appreciate it, Loretta. Thank you. But he wanted the best of the best. So he's saying, go get the young men who are going to grow up. I can train them. I can teach them. I can do all these things. Go get them because I want the best of the best. And then he continues. He says, we're going to teach them the language. In other words, I want them to speak like we speak, right? And then he says, and we're going to teach them the literature of the Babylonians. And so he wants them to think like the Babylonians think, which aren't following God at this time. And so then it says, the king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. And this is important. I want you to think about this. He assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. And we'll get back to that in a little bit. Verse 5, it says they were to be trained for 3 years. And after that, they were to enter the king's service. And so he was grooming them, right? King Nebuchadnezzar was grooming the best of the best, the purebreds, whatever you want to say. And he was training them to be the best Babylonians, right? Not the best worshipers of Yahweh, but the best Babylonians. And so that they would have more power. And it makes me think of when I think about King Nebuchadnezzar, how he is literally trying to change everything about these boys. It reminds me of what our spiritual enemy does to us, right? Satan wants us to follow, those of us who follow Christ, he wants us to think like he thinks. He wants to change our thinking, right? He wants to change the way that we believe, right? He wants us to go against this. He wants us to believe otherwise against us, and we see it all the time. And he wants us to behave like he would want us to behave. And so I think this doesn't have so much to do with Daniel, but I think how Satan wants to attack us, we've fallen into this lie, this deceit that you can go to church once a week for an hour, or for some of you who are late all the time, 50 minutes, and you can assume, you can think that that's enough. You can think that, man, I'm going to honor God with my whole life by going to church once a week for an hour or 50 minutes for some of you, like I said. But we've fallen into this lie and we can't do it. We can't stand out. We can't stand up for what God tells us to stand up for. We can't be growing, thriving spiritually if that's all we do, right? And we've talked about that a lot. We have to be doing stuff on our own. And again, that's why I encourage you, if you don't know where to start in Daniel. Read through that for the next month. And I promise you, God will reveal a lot of things to you. And so I believe that's why Paul said in Ephesians chapter 6, he's talking about the armor of God, right? A lot of you, if you've been in the church or grown up in Sunday school, you know about the armor of God. He talks about that. And I love what he says in verse 11. He says, put on the full armor of God so that you can do what? It says, so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes, right? And then he goes on to explain what the armor of God is. But it's so that we can stand up, right? As Christians, we're supposed to stand up to the devil's schemes, and we're supposed to stand out. And so the first point this morning is that a committed follower of Jesus stands out. I believe that if you're never standing out, then you're always probably just blending in, right? If you don't look different, if nobody sees something different in you as a Christian, as a Christ follower, then you're probably just blending in. You're doing what everybody else is doing. And I don't believe that that's biblical or godly or what God expects of us. And so when we follow him, we're supposed to look different. And you'll be set apart, right? The word holy literally means, we hear this term holy, it literally means to be set apart. And God even says, be holy as I am holy. Does anybody feel holy? If you say holy, it's this like big church word, and we think, no, there's no way, I'm not holy. Like I hear that and I get overwhelmed, like I'm not holy. But God says, be holy as I'm holy. Be set apart, because God's set apart. He's different. He lives differently than everybody else. And so that's what God is saying when he says that. And so there are times when you have to stand out. And if you're truly following Jesus, if you're truly following Jesus, you will stand out. And that's what we're going to see happen in the life of Daniel and his three friends. And so we're going to continue in verses 6 through 7. And it says, among those who were chosen were some from Judah. You have Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. The chief official gave them new names. To Daniel, the name Belteshazzar. I can't even say these words, so just go with me. To Hananiah, Shadrach. To Mishael, Meshach. And to Azariah, Abednego. And so first they changed their names, right? First it changes their diet, right? It says they're going to eat the king's food. We'll get back to that in just a second. But then it also says they're going to change their names. And so the question is, why did they change their names? If you think about this, these boys were probably, most people, they don't know how old they were for sure, but most people are guessing they were like 12 to 15. Okay, so like young boys, young men that they could groom, that they could make how they wanted. And so you think about their names. They were given their names under the worship of the Lord, under Yahweh, under worship of the God we follow today, under the service of those. The parents were giving these boys their names under the service and worship of the Lord. And so they're literally being stripped away, their identities being stripped away, and they're taken 1,000 miles away from home. And now the king wants them to worship pagan gods, and he's saying, you're going to change your names because I don't want you to even be reminded of Yahweh. I don't want you to be even reminded that your family at one time was following God with their whole hearts. And so he changes their names. And so you go back to their diet. It says that they were supposed to eat the food that was prepared for the king. If you think about this is easy for us to skip over, but if somebody says, hey, you're going to be eating the king's food, that's good news, right? Because the king was eating the best of the best. And so it'd be easy for us to read this and say, man, that sounds good to me. I want what the king's going to eat, right? Whatever he serves me, I'll eat it, right? The problem was, and there's a big problem with Daniel and his friends, the problem was the food that was prepared for the king, we're going to see this in a minute, the meat and the wine were dedicated to pagan gods. And so Daniel drew a line. He understood that there was a problem, and so this created a problem for Daniel because they wanted to honor and worship Yahweh, worship God, right? They wanted to honor God in every way possible. And so yes, we're like, man, just eat the king's food, no big deal. They wanted to honor God, and so they had thought about these things. And so to eat and drink anything dedicated to pagan gods would be crossing the line in their mind, and it would be disrespectful. And so we're going to talk about this, and we're going to try to apply some of this stuff to ourselves. So you look at verse 8, you continue in verse 8, and it says, but Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine. And he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself this way. Now God had caused the official to show favor and compassion to Daniel. The official didn't want to get in trouble, right? Because the king said, feed him my food. And now all of a sudden, Daniel and his friends are saying, no, we're not going to defile ourselves. And so obviously there was some tension there. But you got to notice this. Daniel didn't fight back when his name was taken away, right? If my name was changed, somebody said, hey, we're going to change your name. I don't know if I would it wouldn't be the worst thing ever, right? But they didn't fight back. I think he understood that you can call him whatever you want. It's not going to change who he is on the inside, right? It's not going to change his identity. It's not going to change who he serves. You can take away, Daniel and his friends are saying, you can take away our name. It doesn't matter because we know who we serve. We know who we're going to follow no matter what. And an outward name doesn't define who they were in their hearts. And so their names weren't worth standing up for. And so they didn't defend their names. But then the question is, so when do you take a stand, right? When do you take a stand for the things of God? He took a stand when God's name was about to be defamed, right? Because they knew that eating the food would defile them, right? Because it was dedicated to the pagan gods. And so he says, I'm not going to let you insult my name, God. I've resolved not to defile myself and eat this food, right? And so there was a point when they realized what they had to stand for and the things that really mattered most and what really didn't matter that much, right? And as Christians, I think today we have to make a decision. What am I, is this worth fighting for? Is this worth making a scene over? And I'm not saying Daniel made a scene, but is this worth standing out for, right? There are things that maybe aren't worth it, but then there are a lot of things where we have to draw that line. We have to figure out where that line is and say, I'm going to stand for God in this. I'm going to honor God in this decision. I don't care what it takes. I don't care what I have to do. I'm not going to defile myself. I'm going to honor God. And so what you notice from this account is that he made a predetermined resolution. He made a predetermined resolution. And so what do you think would have happened when they put the king's food in front of him? If they didn't make a predetermined resolution, if they didn't decide beforehand, if they didn't decide they were going to honor God with everything, the king's food comes, it's in front of them, what are they going to do? They're going to eat it, right? Of course they're going to eat it. Who wouldn't eat it? They're going to do what we often do. They're going to compromise. They're going to rationalize, say, well, I have to eat something, right? That's what we do, thinking about the sin in our life. Well, I have to eat something. I'm going to eat, or everybody else is eating it. They're not getting struck down by God. I might as well eat it. I'll do it this one time. Right? God will forgive me. Anybody guilty? I'll be the first to admit it. I've said that and thought that. I'll do it this one time. God will forgive me. And so it would have been easy for them to defile themselves, but they pre-decided that they weren't going to do that. They were going to honor God with everything. And so the second point today is that a predetermined decision delivers success. And so imagine, like I said, they would have compromised and rationalized everything that they did, and it would have been a huge deal. But here's the key. He predetermined, Daniel and his friends both predetermined, and they resolved in their heart ahead of time. They made a decision before they were faced with the temptation, right? And this is a huge deal. because most of the time I am a person that goes with the flow. I don't think things like tomorrow. I don't know every detail of what's going on. My wife probably knows every detail of what's going on for me, but I don't know every detail of what's going on. And so I go with the flow. But if we're guilty of this as Christians, when the temptation arises, we just decide then, right? We decide, well, am I going to give into this or am I not? Most of the time we do, because we don't pre-decide, right? And so Daniel knew that it mattered that they thought about this beforehand. And I truly believe that as Christians, our success will be determined by what we decide ahead of time. And so for a lot of you, there are some things that you need to predetermine. If you think about this in your own life, in your own heart, you need to decide now that no matter what happens in the future, I will do this or I will not do this. I will follow God's word on this. And it better be on everything that you're following God's word on. But you need to decide now, right? You need to decide ahead of time, because when the moment comes and you're put in those situations, oftentimes it's not going to be good. You're going to give into that temptation. That's how Satan works, and he loves it, and he thrives off of that. And so we need to decide ahead of time. When I say ahead of time, I mean like this morning, that in the future with this situation, I'm not going to do this, or I will do this. And so we're going to look at a few examples. I'm going to give you a few examples of what I'm talking about, practical things. One huge example I think of, and we talk about this at youth group, and maybe you'll think now that you won't send your kid to youth group, but we're talking about sex before marriage, right? It's in God's word. God says that it's for married couples, right? That's a huge deal. If you don't decide as a teenager, as an adult, as whatever, if you don't decide that beforehand, you get in the moment, things get wild, right? And all of a sudden, you go places you shouldn't have been, right? You're doing things you shouldn't have done. It's a huge deal. And so that's a huge example. For some of us, we need to predetermine not to do the things that you used to do, right? So before you came to know Christ, you probably did things that maybe you won't do now, right? Or wouldn't do now. And there's nothing wrong with that. But the important part is that you change, something changes, you do something different. And so you predetermine not to do the things you used to do. And so for maybe some people, maybe you used to be a party animal. So be it, that's fine. And now you're deciding, man, I know God says don't get drunk. I know God says don't do all this different stuff. And so now either you don't go to the party, or you say, I'll go to the party, but I'm not going to drink. I know I'm strong enough to do it. Some people aren't, though, right? You realize that. Some people can't go to the party and not drink. Like, it's going to happen. And so you have to pre-decide ahead of time that you're not going to go to that party if that's you, if you can't handle it. Or maybe you need to predetermine in your heart not to be involved in certain discussions at work, right? Anybody work in a place that's full of crazy discussions that maybe aren't very honoring to God? Anybody ever experienced those? Some people probably. And so people start talking trash about each other, right? Stabbing each other in the back, saying things about their boss that maybe they shouldn't. And so this morning, you might need to predetermine that, hey, I'm not gonna be a part of that this week. I'm just gonna walk away. I can be kind to people. I can love people. You don't even have to say anything when those conversations arise. You can just walk away. You don't have to be a part of it. Or maybe you're married, and so you've predetermined in your heart that you're not gonna have intimate conversations with the opposite gender, right? And you might think, man, that's not a big deal. That is a big deal. That's how affairs take place, right? You one little conversation, you go to work and you start complaining about your spouse. Man, my husband's terrible. This is what he did this weekend. You start complaining about your wife. Man, my wife just won't do anything. She just sat there all weekend, didn't do anything. And then they start saying, man, my husband's terrible. And then all of a sudden, things get weird, right? Things start to develop and things get weird. And so you have to predetermine in your heart. The only person that can actually go to work and do that is Alyssa, right? Because she works with me. If she comes to work at the church and starts complaining about her husband, we can have an intimate conversation about it, and then we can kiss and make up. I'm just kidding about that part. But she can do that. If you work with your spouse, go do it. I don't care. But I'm saying you can't do it with people who are not your spouse, because it leads nowhere good. I promise you, there's nothing good that comes from it. And so you have to predetermine those things ahead of time. And so again, maybe this week, you're gonna make a decision this morning. I'm not gonna go to work and complain about my spouse, no matter what they did, no matter what they're doing, no matter how stupid we think they're acting. We're just not gonna do it. We're not gonna talk like that. You also might need to predetermine what you're gonna do, right? So not only what you're not gonna do, but what you're gonna do. You have to think about that. And for us as Christians, we should be predetermining that we're going to honor God with our decisions. For me, I mean, it's kind of obvious because I'm a pastor, but I'm going to predetermine that I'm at church on Sunday morning. If I'm not out of town, I'm going to be at church, right? I'm not going to be at home doing other things. I'm not going to plan family events on Sunday morning. I'm not going to do this or that. I'm going to be at church, right? And like I said, of course, I have to be here because I'm a pastor and the pastor here. But for you guys, think about this. Predetermine that you're going to do things that will honor God, right? Because for a lot of people, for most Christians, not just you, but the church as a whole, this is what people are getting fed, right? Sunday mornings are when people are getting fed. As much as I don't like it, it is what it is. And so you have to pre-decide that you're going to do things. I've predetermined that I'm going to keep my eyes pure, right? For men, this is a huge deal, but also for women, you have to predetermine, because when the time arises, you're going to look. If you don't predetermine ahead of time, you're going to look, and it's not keeping your eyes pure. And so it's a huge deal. And you decide ahead of time before the temptation, you decide before the event, you predetermine that you're going to honor God with your decisions, and that's exactly what Daniel and his friends did. And so it's a huge deal, and it's something we can read and we can skip over and think, man, that's nice, and why did he not want to eat the food? Because he wanted to honor God, right? And so our decision making should honor God, and it's so important for us to think about. When you pre-decide in your heart what to do to honor God, you'll stand out. And if you're never standing out, like I mentioned, you'll just be blending in. And I hate saying this, it sounds harsh, but when you're blending in, I would question whether you're truly trying to follow God, right? If you look like everybody else, if you're doing what everybody else does, I would question. I'm not saying God questions, although I think he probably does, but I would question whether you're truly following God if you're looking like everybody else. And so it's easy for us to read this and think that this was a one-time thing, that Daniel made a good decision this time. But here's the deal. We're going to look at stories for the next several weeks of Daniel and his friends and how they honored God. This wasn't a one-time deal. This wasn't Daniel saying, man, I made the right choice, right? This was Daniel doing it day in and day out, pre-deciding his decisions and pre-deciding that he was going to honor God with everything that he had within him. And he wanted to live unashamed, right? He wanted to live unashamed for Yahweh, for God, the God that we follow. And so we should be living the same way. And we're going to continue in this. Look at what verse 12 through 15 says. Daniel says this to the government leader who's above him. He says, please test your servants for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. In other words, we're not eating that meat or that wine. We're not eating the king's food. We're going to eat vegetables and water, right? It sounds pretty terrible. Anybody agree? I think it sounds terrible. But that's what they're going to do. Verse 13, it says, then compare our appearance with that of the young men who eat the royal food and treat your servants in accordance with what you see. In other words, Daniel's presenting a task or a plan. He says, hey, if you're worried about the king getting upset about us not eating the king's food and looking the best we can, just test us for 10 days, see if we look like everybody else. And so the chief official decided that he was going to agree. In verse 14, so he agreed to this and tested them for 10 days. At the end of the 10 days, they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. So the guard took away their choice food and the wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables instead. And so I love this because instead of making this huge protest, instead of throwing this big fit or making a big scene, right, they presented a plan. They knew what needed to be done to honor God. They knew they shouldn't be eating the king's food only because it was dedicated to pagan gods, right? Which to me and to a lot of us seems like not a big deal. Like just eat the darn food and go on with your day, right? But that's not the case. He wanted to honor God. But I love this because he doesn't throw a fit, but instead he presented a plan and he said, hey, can we simply try something else? He honored and respected the authority. It would be easy for these boys. I put myself in their situation. I would be frustrated, right? Everything is changing. My identity's changed. My food's changed. Everything has changed. My city was destroyed. I would be frustrated, but Daniel and his friends understood that God was going to use them through this. They understood that God was going to work in the middle of their trials, in the middle of their struggles, and that they could continue to honor God. And so you see, you can stand out for the right things in the right ways, and for the wrong things in the wrong ways. And we have to have wisdom, right? We have to have wisdom in our decision making and saying, God, is this worth taking a stand for? Is this something that's not that big of a deal? Right? Or is this something that I know that I need to honor you with? I know that I need to be better about this. And so I'm gonna take a stand. So we have to stand out. You have to pre-decide and resolve in your heart, this is where I'm going to be different. And so this is where I'm called to be different, right? Not only are you deciding this is where I think I need to be different, but this is where we're called to be different. God calls us to do things that he doesn't ask anybody else to do. And so we have to pre-decide to live those things out and to do what God's calling us to do. You look at verse 19. And this is the last verse I'm going to share with you about Daniel 1. It says the king talked with them. He found none equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered the king's service. So because of their wisdom and their pre-deciding, they literally redirected the course of history. Now you have this evil king who now has people in service under him who are worshiping Yahweh, no matter what. They're going to honor God no matter what, and we're going to, like I said, we'll see it all throughout the book of Daniel. But now, because they made this decision, they literally are changing the course of history, which is pretty incredible if you think about this. And I think you'll understand even more so as you read some, and we talk about some of these stories in the weeks to come. But they literally changed the course of history by making one decision to honor God and not defile themselves, as God's word says. And so the third and last point I want to make this morning is that we don't stand out to make a statement. We stand out because he's called us to be different, right? I love reading through God's word, and he gives us so many instructions about things to do, right? It can be overwhelming. And he often says, so many times in so many places, especially Jesus with his teaching, he often gives instructions, and then he says, do this so that people can see God, right? So that he gets the glory. Right? We're not standing out. We're not looking different so that people can be like, oh man, that person's so great. Like they're just the greatest person ever. But we're doing it so that we're pointing people to Jesus, right? I have people in my life that I want them to know Jesus, right? Do you have any? Hopefully you guys have people in your life that you want them to know Jesus, right? Well, it's our job as followers of Christ to show them Jesus. They're not just going to magically, yes, God draws people to him. That's what God's word says. It says that he draws people to them. But I think it's often done through us, right? God uses us, and people aren't going to come to know the Lord unless we're showing them the Lord. And so we have to be thinking about our decisions and our actions and how we look to the rest of the world. And so we need to think about how we're being different. And so I'm going to pray for us, and then after I pray, we're going to, this morning's Communion Sunday, and so I'm kind of cutting things short just so we're not going crazy long. But I'm going to pray for this. This is the invitation time. But also during communion, you're welcome to come up. But after I pray, I'm going to talk about communion just for a couple minutes, and then we're going to take communion together. And so let's pray. Father, I just thank you so much for this day and for the book of Daniel, and just for who Daniel was, him and his friends, and for their decision that they made to honor you. And Father, I just ask today, this morning, right now on November 1st, that we'll make a decision that we're going to honor you with the things that we're going to do. The decisions that we make will honor you no matter what. No matter if it makes us look different, no matter if people are going to make fun of us, no matter if people are harsh with us, no matter if we lose friends. We're going to honor you, Father. And we're going to do this in our workplaces, in our families, wherever we're at. We're going to honor you with the things that we do, and we're going to look like you, Father. And so I just pray that we as a church will take this seriously, that we'll learn from this, and that in the weeks to come we'll look at the life of Daniel and his friends, and we'll be challenged. We'll be challenged to be more like you, and we'll be challenged to be more like Daniel, and have a love for you like they had, Father. And I just thank you for your word and for this day. And it's in your name that we pray. Amen. Moving, I know this is kind of quick and a weird transition, but this morning, like I said, is Communion Sunday. We take communion here at our church the first Sunday of the month. I cannot believe it's November, which is crazy. But it is November, and so we are taking communion today. We invite everybody who's accepted Christ as their Lord and Savior to take communion. If you haven't, no big deal. Just stay where you're at. We don't pass it anymore, or we haven't been just because of COVID, and so there are places to come up. You can come over here, over there, back there. I think there's even one out in the Welcome Center maybe. I'm going to ask Wes to go ahead and uncover those if you don't mind. Matthew, maybe you can grab that one. But as we get ready to take communion, I want to read from 1 Corinthians 11. And it says this in verse 23, "For I received from the Lord what I also passed on to you." This is Paul speaking. He's passing on what he had been taught from the Lord. "The Lord Jesus, on the night he was betrayed, took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, 'This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me.' In the same way, after supper, he took the cup, saying, 'This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this whenever you drink it in remembrance of me.' And then it goes on to say, for whenever you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes. Therefore, whoever eats the bread or drinks the cup of the Lord in an unworthy manner will be guilty of sinning against the body and the blood of the Lord." And I think about this, and I think so many times when we're doing communion, we try all of a sudden to become worthy of communion, right? We're celebrating, we're remembering what Jesus did for us on the cross, right? He went to the cross for us, for me, for you, which is a super personal thing. And we try to become worthy in this moment. We try to think, man, I'm going to give it all to God right now real quick before I go up there and celebrate what he did for me. And I'm going to become worthy. But instead, here's the deal. You're never going to be worthy. I'm never going to be worthy in our eyes, right? We're worthy in God's eyes, for sure. That's why he did it. He wouldn't have went to the cross if we weren't. But instead, we're forgiven, right? Instead, feel forgiven this morning. Instead of feeling like, man, I'm not worthy, understand that you're forgiven. And you will be forgiven for anything that you ask him to forgive you for, which is an incredible promise, right? A promise that I take for granted so many times. So many times I mess up and I forget to say, God, will you please forgive me? I just assume he does, and I know he does, but sometimes I need to say, God, will you please forgive me? And I also need to say it to people at times, right? We need to do that. And so understand this morning that the work of the cross brings forgiveness, and it brings celebration because of the forgiveness. It brings rejoicing because of the forgiveness. And so I'm going to pray for the elements this morning, and then Tom's going to lead us in worship. And as you feel led, come up. You can come to either thing. Just try to stay spread out the best you can, and take it on your own, right? It's between you and the Lord. And so you can go back and sit down and take it as you're needed. And so let's pray for the elements. Father, I just thank you for the gift of salvation. Father, I'm so thankful I don't have to do anything to earn it other than just ask you for it. Father, I know that you've called us to live differently, and we've talked a lot about that. But Lord, I also know that that's a result of us just accepting you and us experiencing your love for us. And so, Father, help us to experience that love this morning. If there's people here this morning that have never come to know you, that have never made that decision to follow you, Father, I just ask that they come and talk to me now. And today can be their first day that they honestly take communion and remember what you've done for them. Father, I just ask that we remember and we celebrate and we rejoice in the fact that you've forgiven us. And yes, we can't do anything to become worthy, but you've made us worthy, Father, by what you did with your Son on the cross. And so, Father, help us just to rejoice in that. Help us to clear anything up that we need to clear up. If there's things in the way this morning, help us to make that time and spend that time clearing those things up, Father. And we just pray all these things in your name. Amen.
Be still and know that He is God. Be still and know that He is holy. Be still, O restless soul of mine. Bow before the Prince of Peace. Let the noise and clamor cease. Still and know that He is God. Be still and know that He is faithful. Consider all that He has done. Stand in awe and be amazed. Know that He will never cheat. Be still. Be still. Be still and know that He's God. Be still and know that He's God. Be still and know that He's God. Be still. Be speechless. Be still and know that He's God. Be still and know that He's our Father. And rest your head upon His breast. Listen to the rhythm of His unfailing heart of love, beating for His little ones, calling each of us to come. Be still. Be still. Be still. Be still.